So I know the Chargers, they don't really throw a lot under, Harbaugh. They're obviously a lot more ground and pound and run oriented. But McConkey actually leads the Chargers in routes run, targets drawn, receiving yards, and receptions. So despite the fact that they are a run first team, I really like his matchup, considering that he does see a majority of the targets in that offense. Cardinals defense that ranks sixth in yards allowed in the passing game, and then seventh in yak allowed, and that's where McConkey's strength really is in the slot and producing that yak. So I think that's actually tremendous value. I would play him over on touchdowns as well. I think he's going to get in the end zone. Take the yards because that seems too good for a guy that's going to have a lot of yak.
Yeah, and he's averaging like around 12 fantasy points a week. And he's a guy that, if you look at it coming into this season, like Quentin Johnson, like everybody was like, oh, maybe he could become the guy. Keenan Allen's gone. Mike Williams is gone. Who's going to step up? And I thought Lad McConkey coming into, the draft was one of the best receivers in the draft, too, top 5 at least. And that's kind of where he was drafted. And, I think that system with, Justin Herbert just fits him perfectly. So I like that pick a lot. This week with the tight end position, I'm going Packers tight end Tucker Kraft, going lower on 35.5 on receiving yards. Here's the biggest factor for me. As good as Houston's defense has been, they are tremendously good against tight ends. When you think about it, a dominant defense, a lot of times that defense takes away the number one option, the number two option, right? Well, they also take away the number 3 option. And the number 3 option is Tucker Kraft, for the Packers this week, going up against Houston. This defense has only allowed 3 catches for 22 yards and 0 touchdowns per game this season. So they have been incredibly impressive. And Kraft is not going to be able to do what he did in previous weeks, which I think it was around 50 plus yards in the receiving category. So I look at it as a really, really tough game, which we will get into momentarily. But I really think that Tucker Kraft has a tough day because Houston's defense, that those DNs, those linebackers, they're tough. And, I just think D'Amico Ryans has this team playing at an ultra high, whether that's offensively, but also defensively. They're becoming a top 5 defense along with the top 5 offense, which I do have them in the Super Bowl, which I mentioned early on this year. And they're looking like a really Super Bowl contender team. So,
We talked earlier about how's this going to work with, you obviously being a Dolphins fan and, fan of a lot of the Boston sports scenes and me not being one. We're kind of on the same page here, Dalton Schultz and the other side of this matchup. So Packers defense, while it is susceptible to getting beat up on the ground, their linebackers are young, athletic. Quay Walker is obviously the leader of that. I don't expect Schultz to have his breakout game this week, even though this is a matchup, Love, Stroud, all the young receivers on both sides. Expect a shootout, but just like yourself, I don't really see the tight end, Dalton Schultz, really playing a huge part in the offense, just considering it is a tough matchup individually for him going against those Packers linebackers. So
yeah, and I think this is a perfect segue, right? Let's get into the games of the week. We're going to pick 2 games that we feel like are must watch. You got to sit down and watch that. Screw Red Zone at that point. If you want to watch good games, here's the key factor. Is the Texans 5-1 at the Packers 4-2. This is by far the game of the week in my eyes. These 2 teams have a ton in common. They're trying to do a lot for their respective, conferences. Let's not even say the division at this point with, what Houston's facing. It's been pretty garbage in the AFC South, to say the least. NFC North has been, incredible. A lot of talent there. And Love continues to grow and show that he is becoming a top 10, maybe at this point, top 5 quarterback in the league, right? And I think what's impressive with, Jordan Love is he has faced adversity, right? Like they got crushed against the Vikings. But guess what? They came back next week, had a great game against the Titans. They had like a lot of good performances, in general this season. And Josh Jacobs, I think, is going to have to be most important for that offense to start rolling, right? And by rolling, I mean both sides of the football. Josh Jacobs is kind of lacking in the category for rushing yards. He is in the middle of the pack when it comes to that. I think what's most important for them is to recognize that Jaden Reed is the real deal. Jaden Reed is becoming their Tyreek Hill, their Debo Samuel. And if there's anything about Michael Furr's offense, is he knows how to run the Shanahan offense extremely well. And Jaden Reed is being put in position to do all those, versatilities and be a dynamic receiver, being able to do two things at once, whether that's, or wide receiver sweep, wide receiver screen, look downfield on the post route. He is anything and everything that the Packers have wanted, and he is the perfect weapon for that offense to succeed. But again, the key component for me is that running game. Can Josh Jacobs or Emmanuel Wilson get going, because they're going to need some help. Jordan Love can't do it on his own, and especially against the Texans and that defense, the Texans are going to be a force, in this game. But I always think there must be something that goes wrong with CJ Stroud. There's something in my stomach as a gut feeling that says, when is he going to cause some type of indecisiveness, right? So I do have the Packers beating the Texans 31-27. So I got the Packers. I really think highly of Love and that offense. And that defense is a top 5 defense when they are capable. So that's the key factor for me, is getting the running game and be able to sustain CJ Stroud in the pocket.
Yeah, I mean, one thing's for sure, they're two of the best young quarterbacks in the league. So for must watch, that's a no brainer. No brainer for sure. The chess match between D'Amico Ryans and Matt LaFleur, two of the best on their sides of the ball, I look forward to seeing as well. So definitely agree with you. That's going to be one to watch. I'm going to actually stay in the NFC North, or at least, you obviously have the Packers. On the other side, Lions and Vikings. The Lions 4-1, coming off their huge win, as I referenced earlier, against the Vikings. 5-0, they're undefeated. They're coming off a bye week as well. NFC North right now, 17-5 overall. The Packers are actually technically dead last, which is kind of crazy to say as a 4-2 team. But Lions impressive win. Vikings off the bye. They looked good in London early on. Second half, they struggled moving the ball. I think this might be one of the best coaching staffs in all of football, between Kevin O'Connell, the way he draws that offense, and then you could probably speak to this a little bit, but Brian Flores, obviously the former head coach in Miami, what he's done with that defense, turning it around from what they were a year ago to now, where they are just causing a lot of problems for a lot of teams. We talked about Jordan Love, and the Packers really got beat up by them a couple of weeks ago. They also shut down C.J. Stroud. And obviously, Aaron Rodgers just a few weeks ago, they turned him over 3 times, which you never see Rodgers throw 3 picks.
Never.
So not to bring my Jets into this, but that was a tough one. So I really like this matchup. I'm going to give the nod, I think, though, to the Vikings. At the end of the day, like I said, I think this is the best coaching staff, and you're giving them an extra week to prepare, and they're going to be at home where that crowd is going to be insane. I like the Vikings 27-23 to edge out Detroit in this one.
Yeah, and I think the reputation that Brian Flores has right now is, like, people look at him and say, he's too hard on his players. He's too stern on the sidelines. He's got to smile more. But he takes his job seriously, right? And, I think, he wants to get the best out of his players for sure. It's just how he delivers that message that needs to be worked on in order for him to be a head coach. We heard it all the time in Miami. Tua Tagovailoa and him butt heads quite often. And so for him just to, focus solely on one side of the football, which is defense, that's kind of his homestead, right? And so I think it's where he's needed. It's where he needs to stay. And I really think that Brian Flores is more than capable of building this defense and helping Kevin O'Connell on that offensive side and reading defenses while offense is on the field. I think that's a key component that some people do miss, is when you're that defensive sounded coach, you can read defenses of other teams and give hints to the offensive coordinator or the head coach. It's like, hey, we're seeing this often. Watch out for this. It's not because Brian Flores focuses on his own defense. there are little things that you can take away from other defenses while you watch the offense on the field and become a scout and figure out what will work against that defense. So that's something that I think a lot of coaches and organizations should take advantage of, having a dual role. So again, it's not a matter of Brian Flores being a bad person. It's not. It's just he doesn't know how to deliver the message to players when they don't do well. And Tua, let's call it what it is. He was horrible his rookie year. And so, I think eventually you just kind of have to take it with a grain of salt with Brian Flores and just he's just naturally that type of person. Moving on, Ravens 4-2 at Buccaneers 4-2. Ravens are coming off a huge win, red hot Commanders team with Jaden Daniels leading the pack, and Buccaneers again they're becoming more and more inept on being a massive offensive team, and they had a tremendous second half, scoring 27 points against the Saints last week. But I got the Ravens, right? I just think when you look at Tampa Bay's defense, there are so many holes in that defensive line and that linebacking core that any team with a decent running back and a good offensive line can run through that tremendously. And so Derrick Henry is going to be a beast this week. He really will be. And Lamar Jackson, if there's any game where he can kind of take it off from a passing standpoint, it's this type of game, as long as the offensive line can hold their own. And I think this is a game exactly what the dual threat of Lamar Jackson RPO with, Derrick Henry is going to take place. Because I think Buccaneers they are one of the worst run defensive teams in all of football. And I don't think that will stop this week. I have it 38-24, the final score, because I do think Baker finds a way to get downfield. But I also think that Lamar Jackson becomes that dual threat, but not as pass heavy as he's been in these past few weeks. So
Yeah, I mean, really, it's kind of the tail of the tape. I mean, like you just said, Buccaneers up front, they've had issues all season, whether it's injuries, whether just not making tackles. Um, they've been atrocious against the run. And if there's one thing Baltimore will do to you, I mean, Derrick Henry he scored a touchdown every game this year. We talked about sneaky, quiet, like MVP candidates. I think Derrick Henry has to be in the conversation. He's got over 800 rushing yards, and I think 8 or 9 touchdowns in
Yep.
6 games.
Yeah.
So Derrick Henry will continue to do what Derrick Henry does. He's King Henry for a reason. Like you said, Lamar Jackson. If there's any chance that he's going to have to showcase what he can do as a dual threat, it's also going to be in this matchup, and I think we'll dial back the passing, like you referenced as well. So definitely, I think the Ravens on paper look like they should have this matchup pretty handily.